and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. We are a long way from the time of year when we play Lent Madness, that great game that introduces us to the lives of all kinds of obscure saints. Yet I was struck by a story I read recently about an obscure and everyday saint named Zita. She was a house servant in Italy during the 13th century. She was known to be patient and responsible and very devoted to God. She meditated and went to Mass every day. But most especially, she was known for her great generosity. Whatever she had, Zita gave away to those less fortunate than she was. One cold morning, the story goes, her master gave Zita his cloak to wear on her way to church. And on the way, she met a beggar and gave it away to him without a moment's thought. When she returned home without it, she was scolded, and yet later that evening, a mysterious stranger appeared at the door of the house with a cloak. Another time, Zita was called away from the kitchen while baking bread to attend to a sick woman in the village. And as the story goes, the other servants were amazed to discover a company of angels tending the ovens so the bread wouldn't burn. Now, this story made me smile when I read it because it is so like St. Matthias. Because all of us know there are companies of angels among us. Those who tend to the ovens, those who make sure that people are fed and clothed, those who make sure our building is tidy and welcoming and warm, warmer this morning than it was earlier, for sure. Those who help us sing and worship together. The companies of angels are all here, doing what they do to give to this household in ways that we all notice, and in small, unseen ways that we may not always notice. When I first came to St. Matthias, I was asking a lot of questions so that I could come to understand who does what and how things work. And the answer I often heard was something like this. People have ministries that they are passionate about, but often things just happen. Things just happen. In other words, somehow there is a company of angels that appears at just the right time so that the bread doesn't burn. There is a sacred quality that this household has in common with the everyday saint named Zita. That is, there is a deep and strong sense of what is called agency, that we are agents of our circumstances, and that we have the ability and the power to influence the course of those circumstances. Our agency is part and parcel of our relationship with God. We are, in fact, co-agents with God. That is how God created us and the universe. God gave us the sacred responsibility to tend to other beings as God's co-agents in this great thing called creation. And that's a big and sacred responsibility. And it asks two things of us: trust and sacrifice. Trust and sacrifice. I hear trust and sacrifice in the story of Zita. She trusted that God was with her in the sacrifices she made, and that the sacrifices she made were not burdens or difficult choices. Rather, sacrifices for her were things given away and made holy for the sake of love. I hear trust and sacrifice in the story of Ruth and Naomi. This is a little gem of a story. I would urge you to read the whole thing. We just heard a little tiny piece of it, and we only read it in church once every 3 years. So the story of Ruth is important to many people because it establishes the genealogy from Naomi and Ruth to Ruth's son, Obed, to Jesse and David, and eventually to Jesus. But it's also a story about sacrifice and trust. Ruth and her mother-in-law Naomi are widows, which put them at great risk for a lifetime of alienation and poverty. Naomi had also been living much of her life as a refugee. She fled famine in her home in Judah and settled in the country of Moab, where her sons married local women. And after her sons died, the three widows find themselves in dire straits. But now the famine is over back in Naomi's homeland, and she sets to return there. And as she goes, she tells her daughters-in-law, "Go on back home to where you came from. You might be able to make a new life for yourself, but you'll never get anywhere hanging around with an old widow like me." But Ruth refuses to leave her. She says, "Do not press me to leave you. Where you go, I will go. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God." And in the end, Ruth bore a son, Obed, and Naomi with her was ushered into the community where they would be cared for until the end. These women trusted that God was with them, trusted that there was a better life for them together, even as they sacrificed things for each other to get there. And as such, they acted as co-agents with God amid their very difficult circumstances. I also hear trust and sacrifice in the story of the widow in the temple who drops the last 2 coins she has into the collection plate. She gives out of her poverty while others contributed out of their abundance. And yes, there is a message here about giving proportionally to one's ability to contribute, but it seems also that Jesus calls attention to this woman for another reason. At that critical moment, when she carries out that action of dropping her last 2 coins into the treasury, she carries in her heart the trust to choose sacrifice over her survival by having the trust to make a sacrifice, to give away something for the sake of love. This woman affirms her own agency, that rather being driven by her circumstances into a meager form of survival, she chooses to make what is for her an extravagant gift. Whatever the rich people and the temple authorities were doing or not doing to take advantage or abuse their power, that was not her concern. That was her sacrifice given freely to God. There, her 2 coins are what she chooses to give away to be made holy for the sake of love. These stories of Zita and Naomi and Ruth and the widow and each one of our stories calls us to remember that God is at work every day here among us, that we are co-agents with God. God labors here on the ground with us, in our hearts, among other people, through all of life's circumstances, the good ones and the hard ones. These call on us to trust and to sacrifice. This is how I have seen a company of angels at work here at St. Matthias. So many choose to give to this church of their time, of their physical labor, of their creative talents, of their many, many skills and gifts, and of their financial support, of their baking and tending the bread. So as this year draws to a close and we begin to look ahead to a new year and new circumstances and new challenges, consider what it is that you have that can be sacrificed, that is given away to be made holy for the sake of love. Amen.